Mike, N2MAK, and I'm going to do my best not to get everyone nauseous with the shaking camera here. I am in Bloomfield, New York at the Antique Wireless Museum, or the newly branded Communications Technology Museum. Thanks for joining me for this live stream. I got a great tour lined up. So let's go inside and check it out. All right. Here's the man of the hour. This is Tim. Tim's going to be our tour guide. And why don't you bring us around?
Hi there, everybody. So, welcome to the Communication Technologies Museum. Recently changed the name from Antique Wireless Museum just to better express what we do, but we are still owned and operated by the Antique Wireless Association. So let's walk around and start you off. So I'm sure you're aware that communication technology really started with the telegraph, and particularly with the development of Morse code, which you will know as being dots and dashes, unless you're someone who's an aficionado. Why dots and dashes? The reason is it was originally printed dots and dashes on a piece of paper. As you made the circuit, that would cut a dot, that would cut a dash. But the operators eventually learned to understand the signal without looking at the paper tape. So they would listen to things like this. That was CQ. It's somewhat tiring to spend your day moving your hand up and down. Nowadays we'd say you get carpal tunnel syndrome. In those days they called it glass arm, which is a great word for it. But a development was originally just a side swiper that you could move to the left and right. This one is a slightly more advanced version where if you put it to the right, it makes all the dots, becomes like that. Now of course it sounds
Hey, Eric,
like
thanks
that.
for joining.
Right, so that's a little background to Morse code. How did we get there? Obviously, Samuel Morse is the name that we all know. Samuel Morse was a fine artist, a painter, and he has some great works. If you're ever in Poughkeepsie, his house is there with some of his paintings. He toured Europe, meeting all the great artists of the day, and I think he was probably pre-prepared for telegraphy, because in 1825 he was travelling, arranging to do a painting, and his wife, his 25-year-old wife, gave birth to a baby, his third child, and then she died. His father wrote to him that by the time he got back, she'd been buried. So I'm sure that that idea lived with him that people shouldn't have to go through this. And he was coming back on a ship from Europe on a painting trip, and he met someone who told him all about electromagnetism, and he realized this was something you could do to build a telegraph. And by the time he arrived back in New York, he put together plans. He didn't have money, so it took a few years for him to actually get this going. And in the process, he met Albert Vail, who was had some practical ideas, and between the two of them, they developed a better working system, including Morse code. And the code was probably more to do with Vail than Morse himself. The other problem was that you could only send a Morse code signal about 2 miles because the batteries weren't strong enough to power it up. They met an engineer who came up with the idea of using relays. So you use the weak signal from 2 miles away to trigger another 2 miles, so you could relay Morse much further. He developed, after a few trials, he developed a system that used the railroad track as the layout to run a signal from Baltimore to Washington DC. And we actually have here a book, and you can see he has his name on it. And if I can show you, I can't show you the original, but if I show you the photocopies, here you see the plans of the first operational system. You've got Baltimore here, and you've got Washington up here.
Cool.
So, and we have here a replica of one of the registers used for receiving the Morse code, and this one here on the left was actually owned by Morse, but was not one of the original ones.
No, Steve, I'm not using a gimbal. Hopefully it's not too shaky. I'm doing my best.
Okay. So, following the development of telegraphy, which took off rapidly across the United States, I think in the early 1860s we got the Pony Express, which was able to deliver a message from the East Coast, or actually Missouri, to San Francisco in only 10 days. Then we got a telegraph wire across the country, and of course the Pony Express just disappeared overnight. But there was another idea in the wings, because as it became known, wireless telegraphy, or radio as we call it today. The first example of this was Hertz, Heinrich Hertz, a German, who used something like this round resonator to transmit a signal across his laboratory. He wrote several papers, he became famous, but he said it's just pointless. There's nothing, no practical value to this discovery. And it was left, as we know, to Marconi to come up with a working radio system, and he experimented at his family home in Bologna, or near Bologna, and this little box here in the middle has a piece of wire in it, and I find that one of the most intriguing bits of the things we have in the museum. That is actually part of the wire from the first antenna in his house in Bologna that he used to get radio to work, and he transmitted over a range of about 2 miles.
Hey, Andy and Bob, just saying hi. I see you guys in the chat there.
Based on that 2 mile range, he used his father's contacts to go to Italian Navy and say, look what I can do. And they said, yeah, but 2 miles, we're not interested. As it happens, his mother had some very good connections in Britain, in London, and she was Irish, so she spoke English, and she'd made sure that her son spoke English. So she and Guglielmo Marconi went to London, and within a year they got a patent for radio, and it started up Marconi Company.
All right.
So let's look next.
Hey, Chris, I see you in there. Just saying hi.
What a Marconi radio station would have looked like in these early days. This is one that we rescued from Buffalo. This was in service at the at Buffalo News, and not only was Marconi a great inventor, but he was also a good businessman. You couldn't buy this equipment. You leased it from the Marconi company, and you couldn't use it. You had to pay for a Marconi wireless operator to come and run it. So that is what you're seeing here. And of course, the first use for it was contacting ships.
Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly. So let me take you over. This is an interesting little story here.
Okay.
So these are commercial radios from Telefunken, obviously a German company, from 1905. the transmitter on the right, receiver on the left. The American Navy decided they wanted radio equipment, and the company they chose to provide it was Telefunken. Of course, shortly after that, the First World War started, and the
Oh,
US
boy.
Navy were equipped with Telefunken radios. That was the end of that partnership. Now, we'll see in a moment an example of the first radios, and the one thing that was missing was the idea of tuning. So when you transmitted, it went out on all frequencies. So if you were listening, you would hear everybody. So it was complete cacophony.
So it's kind of like a Baofeng.
I'm afraid it
It's
was.
transmitting all over the place, huh?
So we'll come back in a moment so that I can show you what we mean by.
Oh, we might be here for a while. Oh, boy.
So this is the room for amateur radio. Of course, at the beginning, there was absolutely no control or regulation. If you wanted to transmit a signal, you did. You had to build your own equipment. If you were an amateur at home, so this is the sort of equipment you would build. This one here is an early spark transmitter. This is your spark gap. So that's a relatively low power one and fairly innocuous. And let me show you one that's a bit more powerful.
Oh, yeah.
And this was built by an amateur and probably used in his house. Now the problem with that is that if you have a radio outside here listening, it doesn't matter where you were tuned to, you would have
Okay.
heard.
Okay.
They were made illegal in the 1930s. All radios must be tuned to a particular frequency. We take good care not to connect this to any sort of antenna, so hopefully the interference doesn't go too far. But while we're in this room,
Yeah.
let me just show you. So gradually it went from you build your own equipment to you can start buying
Hey, Roger.
fairly crude equipment. And then we get the growth of companies like Collins.
Oh, yeah.
And beautiful
Wow.
stuff. Heathkit, of
Look at some
course.
of this stuff. That's. Now I know that to back up to that spark gap real quick, it was saying 1,000 watts. 1,000 watts on spark gap. What would that be like on CW or SSB? Because it's not going to be as much, I'm going to guess. But do you know?
Well, that would be. So this is basically generating a kilowatt input. What comes out as radio signal, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
That wouldn't have an enormous range, but the only means of transmission would be CW, because you couldn't, with that sort of equipment, modulate it.
So a question in the chat was, does Bloomfield have a special connection to wireless? So does Bloomfield, the town?
No.
Okay.
So the reason the museum is here is that back in the 50s, 3 employees of Xerox, which was headquartered in Rochester,
Yeah.
just up the road, realized, and they were all radio amateurs, they realized that there was a lot of radio equipment which was just going to disappear. So they started a museum in the barn of one of them. And he then moved to Bloomfield, and so that's why the museum
Nice.
is here.
Okay.
But we have lots of things which are world first here. It's a world-class museum.
Yep.
Definitely worth a visit if you
Yeah.
have an opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, let's get a shot of some of the stuff over on this
so-
side.
And we can get down to this side, and you're seeing the growth of Japanese equipment.
Oh, yeah. Wow. I love the look of some of the older stuff, and maybe it's just growing up in like the 80s and the 90s and being used to seeing dials and buttons for every single
Yes.
function. You don't have, the menus and things buried down below that you got to search for.
Yeah,
Everything's right in front of
This
you.
equipment is nice looking and is nice to use.
Very cool.
All right. We have a collection of QSL cards here. Several from countries like here. We've got the Soviet Union, places that don't exist anymore,
Wow.
or at least the names don't exist.
All right.
So let's jump back. That was a bit of a jump forward.
Okay.
What really put wireless on the map was this ship here, which I expect everyone has recognized. This is the Titanic.
There's a little bit of a reflection on the glass, but this is the Titanic, if you can't tell.
In here we have a replica of the Titanic's radio room, and originally it was reconstructed from photographs of the sister ships of the Titanic. But when the Titanic was discovered at the bottom of the ocean, and they took cameras into the radio room, all of this wood that you can see had decomposed. There were only the wires, but it was enough to tell them that the layout they had was not right. And this is actually how it would have been laid out. So this would have been used by the radio operator mainly to send telegrams from first class, saying things like, "Oh, it's beautiful here. Nice icebergs everywhere."
Icebergs everywhere.
Yeah. When the ship started to go down, they sent an emergency message, and the emergency code of the American Morse was CJD, and they weren't getting any response, so they tried the German signal, which was SOS, and that, of course, and that got a response, and that is now, of course, the standard for emergency messages. And in fact, I didn't mention earlier, there are two Morse codes. There's American Morse and what is now known as International Morse. And it's International Morse, which is used everywhere. American Morse was used on the railroads here and by the telegraph service.
Okay.
And they're similar, but whereas the Morse that is around today is just dits and dars, or dots and dashes if you like, there were also spaces in the American Morse.
Awesome.
Okay. So,
I'm just getting those
yep.
signs up there I just noticed before we left.
All right. So, let's have a look at the growth of broadcasting, of course, meant music. A lot of the music that was played was actually played live, so most of the broadcasters would have had an orchestra or whatever. But recorded music was important, and let me show you a little bit about how this developed. First of all, we have
Ryan.
The cylinder of Edison. You can tell it's music, you can tell there's a voice, but it's pretty difficult to understand what it is. There's another problem with that. It's hard to mass produce those cylinders. So then we get to the discs, which could be pressed from a mold. And this is Edison. The sound is recorded in a kind of hill and dale, it's called, mode, so that it's up and down within the groove, unlike more recent records. So but let's hear what this sounds like. So much better reproduction as well. But you'll notice that this part is horizontal. That's because the recording is up and down. So you've got a needle, a metal needle there, connected to a flat diaphragm, which is pushed up and down, which moves a column of air through here. And the widening of that column, as that pipe gets wider, is the amplification.
Okay.
All of the sound is coming from that needle. And if we look, this is a more modern version. It has an electric motor, so you don't have to wind it up. but it is still acoustic. So, but now the recording is done sideways.
Okay.
And there. Now, you've got a volume control. But remember, all of that sound, which is enough to fill a small dance hall, is just coming from that needle, vibrating up and down, pushing the diaphragm, which then moves a column of air. While we're here, another little interesting snippet of history. These records only played for a few minutes. So if you wanted a longer work, a symphony or whatever, you'd obviously need a lot. This would have been called a record album. So that is why we still use that term today.
Okay.
This is how they started. Okay.
That's neat to see.
All right, let's move on. Let's look at television here. The idea of television is almost as old as voice radio, but the technology wasn't available. The first attempts were with a rotating disc, which basically with a light behind it, and that was modulated by these little lenses.
Okay.
And this was actually the receiver. The transmitter would have looked similar. The quality of the picture would have been absolutely awful. Then we got the first cathode ray tube TVs. This one is 343 lines, so you scan the picture, 343 lines. You get a tolerable picture.
All right.
You might wonder why this arrangement. We have a screen, we have the screen here, but you've got a mirror at 45 degrees, so you sit and look at it. The reason is you couldn't make the tube less than about 3 feet long, so it really wasn't sensible to have that horizontal.
I was gonna say it's interesting. We're looking here now at television, and here I am. I'm live streaming with a phone that I keep in my pocket.
Exactly.
And we're getting out across the. I know that there were some folks in the chat from the UK and Norway, and it's amazing, seeing this, juxtaposed to what we're doing right now with YouTube and everything. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. This TV here is kind of futuristic design, and they're very collectible nowadays. The cathode ray tube TVs got smaller and smaller. This is a Sinclair one with a very small screen, but this is still a cathode ray tube, which is why this is relatively long.
I definitely remember the Sony Watchman, and even seeing some of the portable televisions like that.
But it's amazing to think, most of us grew up watching TV on something like that.
Yep.
And it's completely opposite.
There's the bunny ears. I still have some of those. I've gone over a decade without cable. And so, oh wow. Very, very cool.
A TV here in the corner with a magnifying glass so you can see the screen.
Oh yeah, you would totally need it for that. Look at that little thing. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you all in the chat, everyone who's watching live now. Definitely appreciate it. And if you got questions for Tim or I, drop them in the chat. I'll see them. I can't type to respond, but I'll try to say hi as I see people drop in, and as I see questions, I'll try to work them in here.
So let me show you a couple of interesting things that we had. As everyone knows, Bell operated the telephone system across the entire country. To do that, you can't get a telephone signal from one side to the other without amplification. So they had these vacuum tube-based amplifiers as part of their network. And they had a team of operational engineers who would go around replacing the vacuum tubes. So could they find some way of getting around this? Well, they also had one of the world's best engineering laboratories. So they invented something called the transistor. Once they'd invented the transistor, they thought, I wonder if we can do anything else with that. And they built this. which is
Yeah.
the world's first transistor radio.
First one.
Absolutely, 1951.
Spin it around. I remember this from last look.
Yeah, the transistors are in here. They're not very recognizable because transistors in 1951 didn't look like transistors of today. But like several of the world's firsts that we have here, this went from the laboratory straight into a dumpster. What
Oh,
use is
jeez.
it? Fortunately, one of the employees had enough sense to realize it was valuable. He took it, and here he is presenting it to the museum.
That's awesome.
Exactly. But transistor radios never looked like this in production. Here we have the first transistor radio that was developed here in the US, and this is 4 transistors. Later on they became 6 and 8 transistors, but that was more marketing than any real engineering reason. Okay, let's carry on down this way. I'm not going to talk about each of these radios, but we like to think of this as an industrial design part of the museum.
Oh my gosh,
And
there's
people
so many cool things.
Yeah, you can build a radio to look like whatever you want. So it could be.
Look at the
yes,
pig.
Exactly.
And the goat, the panda, Bugs Bunny.
So of course, what we're looking at here is the transistor revolution in the 60s, when everybody wanted one of these pocket-sized
Look at these
radios.
It's sad when I start to see what looks like CD players in museums.
Exactly. Yep.
My last car had a CD player in it, and I only traded that in a few months ago.
So here we've got vacuum tube radios.
Okay.
From the US, and we'll see some European ones later on.
Okay.
They developed in different ways. Here, because you've got such a big market, it was really worth building radios as cheaply as possible. So you get things like the American 5, where they worked out the technology of not needing a transformer and just design vacuum tubes that use up the 110 volts that you've got available.
GE, RCA, Emerson, Victor. Look at that Motorola.
What you don't see are many European radios here in the US, and similarly in Europe you don't see any US radios. The Europeans more or less excluded the US from selling radios in Europe by the simple means of having 2 AM bands. They had medium wave and long wave.
Yep.
Long wave wasn't used here. Nobody wanted a radio that didn't have long wave. This is worth talking about. Originally, as I mentioned, there was really no discipline as to where you broadcast. Gradually, bands were set up, and the amateurs were told, you can have the shortwave, HF as we call it now, because, as everyone knew, it's useless. You can't do anything with these shortwaves. But in 1921, a group of hands here in the US put together a radio, a transmitter, and then went off to Scotland, where they managed to hear a signal, proving that HF is actually usable worldwide.
Yep.
That was in 1921. In 2021, a group from here and another radio club put together this using equipment from the time, from 1921, and replicated that test back in 2021.
Cool. Yep.
Now, I imagine we have a number of radio amateurs on the call.
Yeah.
So let's go into our amateur radio room.
think when I was here last year, they're still putting some finishing touches on it.
We're still putting
But
finishing touches.
it's never done, is it, when it comes to hams?
In particular, we have yet to put up our tower antenna.
Okay.
But we have a modern aircraft station here. And we have a nice Collins layout.
What a nice setup for a ham shack
Absolutely.
here.
We have here a whole array of different receivers, and the idea is you can switch the antenna from one to another, so you can compare how they perform.
Now, is this available for members to use?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's the intention.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got to ask, since you saw me sign up as a member right before we started this.
That's the intention. That this is an operation.
Oh, wow.
This is not so much a museum, although what you're looking at now clearly is a museum piece. This was built by James Millen.
Okay.
I don't know where he had this. Perhaps it was in his bedroom. But it's an early idea of rack-mounted gear. If you look here, you can see the vacuum tubes. You do not want to be round the back of this when it's operational. We're in the process here of setting up a rigging station. So we've got the teleprinter and everything.
Okay.
This will soon be set up. We have some pretty amazing bits of Collins equipment. This was built for amateurs. I'm not sure what the power output of this, but you can tell from the vacuum tubes it's pretty substantial.
Yeah.
Over here, this is one of my favourite radios. This is a Roder & Schwarz, a German shortwave receiver. Very heavy, beautifully made, and in very nice condition.
But it's got the handle, so it's portable for POTA, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's got handles here on the side as well. So I guess two people could just about carry it.
Yeah.
Here is Harris equipment. Harris is based in Rochester, so local equipment. And then we have here an RCA transmitter. This is a broadcast transmitter. You can see the array of transmitting tubes there.
Oh, yeah. That just looks cool with the door on it.
Yeah. We have a plate voltage which is measured in kilovolts. I don't know what it ran at, but you don't want to be too close to that either. Okay. So here, we can come back and look at this later.
Okay.
Row after row of mainly domestic receivers.
Wow.
This is an interesting display. This was the Voice of America transmitting site based in Delano, California. And when it shut down, we got permission to get it. We dismantled it and brought it over here. One of the conditions was we had to get it put together as an exhibit within 18 months. So it was quite a project.
This is awesome. I love the red phone there, though.
Oh, yeah.
That's like, oh.
Yeah.
This is so cool.
And it is playing the sort of music that we would have heard on Voice of America. Growing up in the UK, at night after the BBC shut down, about the only thing you could really hear was Voice of America and Radio Moscow.
Okay.
Voice of America is a lot more interesting than Radio Moscow.
I bet it is. I bet it is.
Um, some of you may be aware of the radio telescope that was in Puerto Rico at Arecibo,
Yeah.
and which was destroyed in a storm when it collapsed. The dish has been dismantled, and I believe all of the 38,000 parts of the dish antenna were scrapped, except for two, which are up there.
Oh yeah.
One of them
So both of those
were part of the dish.
are from Arecibo. Okay.
From Arecibo. They were sent to the continental US for cleaning. The one on the left got cleaned, the one on the right did not.
Yeah, clearly. Okay.
And we managed to get those.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a little bit of glare on the images over there, but yeah, I can see the Arecibo now. Okay. Very cool.
As you can see, I'm walking past a number of things. There's a ton of stuff to
Yeah.
see. Here, we don't have an Enigma machine, which is what the Nazis were using as a coding system. But the Swiss, who were neutral during the Second World War, were also using the Enigma machine. Once they realized that it was deciphered by the Allies, they had to build their own. So this is a Swiss version of the Enigma coding machine.
Nice.
Here we have a collection of Morse keys built by an engineer. There's a picture of him. These are only a few of the keys that he has built, and they're beautifully engineered with a lot of imagination. I think one of my favorites is this one here, because you place your mug on it and you move your mug to the left and it will send a dit, and you move it to the right and it will send a dash. So
But what happens if you want to drink?
well, you just have to stop sending for a moment.
That's neat.
Exactly.
Oh my god, the things that hams come up with sometimes. Oh yeah. Yeah, so there's the hat from Contact. And
Yes.
yeah, there is a little bit better of a view of the stuff from Arecibo.
Yeah, there's a great YouTube video, or a very sad video, showing the collapse. That's worth looking at. Part of our collection of vacuum tubes, we have, I don't know how many, but just an enormous number of vacuum tubes.
Yeah.
This one is known as a lighthouse tube because the top of it looks like a lighthouse. You've just got a very small bit of glass.
Oh.
The blue ones at the top, that was just marketing. There's no reason why they needed to be blue, but rather
Sure
nice
looks
looking.
cool though.
Exactly. Well, we're back here. During the Cold War, the United States built bunkers across the country for local governments to use in the event of a nuclear strike. This is radio gear that was rescued from a bunker in New York, I think in Europe, which was abandoned. We got the radio equipment and we restored it to working order. The person who restored it said it is about the hardest radio to operate he'd ever come across. But it's a rather nice looking piece of gear.
Yeah.
Okay. Over here we have just some exhibits, some donations that have come in, not yet been processed.
I just got to go see the Zenith
And we have
stuff
a
real
collection
quick.
of Zenith radios.
Look
yeah.
at that.
Yeah. And when we show people around, almost always they'll look at this and say, "Oh, we had one of those when I was a kid."
Yeah. Yeah, I remember a lot of these.
We have the radio batteries. We needed to run them.
Yeah, some really cool stuff. Here, clearly
yes.
some of the military gear.
Portable,
Yeah.
just about.
Yeah, and Harris being here in Rochester.
Yes, we have a good collection of Harris
Yeah.
equipment.
Yeah, there's some really neat stuff.
Okay. Let's go and look at one of the other uses for radio, which is teleprinting.
Yeah. I think I hear it.
Yeah. So this is a telex machine. This is a German one. It used the telephone system, the telephone lines, but you basically sent text messages that were encoded using paper tape.
Oh, yeah.
And most businesses would have something like this to communicate with their customers. We've got quite a selection.
I love seeing the rotary dials,
yes.
growing up with those in the house.
Right. So a big office, let's say a financial house, a stockbroker or whatever, would need to be connected to a lot of different information sources. So you'd have something like this, a multiple printer.
Oh, wow.
You wouldn't just have one of these, you might have a row of about 10 of them. That's what they sounded like.
Yeah.
You'd have really needed to shout. There's an interesting photograph here of a battleship equipped with telex machines.
Look at these.
Yeah.
Very cool.
We have down here what's called a portable system. But
Oh,
again,
wow.
you need at least 2 people to move that. Here's a really early example from 1908, American Telegraph Manufacturing Company. So that used little coil solenoids to operate the printing.
Wow.
You can hear the signal that was used.
Yeah.
Basically, it's 2 codes, 2 slightly varying frequencies. Bordeaux is the technique.
All right, let me turn around here. Woo.
So just take a quick look at some of these radios. We had the good fortune to receive a bequest from a Swiss radio collector. So a lot of these in here are European radios. Not all of
Okay.
them.
Yeah, there's so much here. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And of course, what you're seeing is maybe 20% of the collection. This is an Atwater Kent radio. We actually have a whole room devoted to Atwater Kent. And this, you see, we've got the 3 tuning dials.
Oh, yeah.
A few years after this was made in 1924. And of course, tuning 3 dials to get the station you want is pretty complicated. And they actually invented the single dial tuner in about 1930, I think it was, maybe a couple of years after that. So we have them to thank. Here we have amateur radio gear from various years and from different manufacturers. This is National, R&E, And we have Viking. This is a rather nice looking high gain radio. Complete with the power unit and speaker. Handcrafters.
Oh yeah.
A lot of these are pretty heavy.
Hold on. There's beer and wine. Yeah,
Beer and wine.
I like you. You got some of the ones with radio themes.
Yes.
Warhorse is good. That's right off Seneca Lake. Nice. Yeah, there's so much stuff here. Sorry, I can't get all of it, but it's just, oh. And even if I could, I probably wouldn't do it justice. But
Heathcote, of course.
yeah, it's more amateur radio.
Ah, yeah. Most of these are replicas of
Okay.
early radio gear built by one of our members.
Yeah.
But this is all Heathcote.
Oh yeah.
Heathcote made everything electronic. You could get doorbells from Heathcote, tape recorders, as well as radio gear, burglar alarms. Some S-line Collins equipment here.
Oh, look at that yellow stuff there.
Yeah.
Ooh, Geiger counter.
And then here we have direction finding receivers.
Okay.
You'd rotate, not looking as people imagine for the strongest signal, but looking for the null, the weakest point, where it disappears entirely. Be careful. All right, let's go down the other side of the museum.
All right.
This is a nice Zenith console. Everything you want, your record player, your radio.
My back hurts looking at it. I think about moving something like that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Even just like the old CRT TVs weighed so much. But it looks great.
Console radios. They're less collectible than the smaller ones because you need a lot of space.
You do. Yep.
Back in the 1930s, if you were interested in radio, and of course everybody was back then, you would come to a store like this.
This is so cool.
If you're kind of average Joe, you'd probably buy bits like this and build your own radio. So this is the, here you've got the crystal detector, the cat's whisker little wire, and the crystal, which would be a piece of galena, and you move it around until you hear a sound, and then you tune, you get your signal. If you had a bit more money, you'd buy something like this. These are radios from the early 20s, a bit later.
Oh.
But they weren't reliable, so you would have a place like this, every radio store where an engineer would repair your radios. Nice soldering iron.
Oh, wow.
Heated over a gas flame or something, not electrically.
I think the tip needed to be cleaned on that thing.
Yeah, you would. Much later, you would go to a drugstore and you would take the vacuum tubes and you would just plug them in here and it would tell you replace or good. If you know anything about vacuum tubes, you know there's a big difference between replace and good. You really want to be able to measure the characteristics of the vacuum tube.
So this thing probably sold a lot of tubes.
Oh yes, absolutely. Here we have purchased in 1947. Here's the receipt from the original purchase. How much did it cost? $39.50. Heathkit 5-inch oscilloscope.
2 Bowfangs.
I believe there's only 2 of these in existence today.
Wow.
This is an interesting exhibit. You've got a Philco console receiver, but it came with the remote control. And this was wireless. I don't know how many batteries it had inside it. It's quite heavy, and you would dial in the station you wanted, and it would switch the radio. I think it would be easier to get up and push the button here myself.
Yeah. That's one heck of a remote control.
Isn't it?
You don't lose that remote. That solves a problem, actually.
Right.
Not going to lose that in the couch.
Then up here we have a display of interest to local people.
Oh, yeah.
This is equipment built in Rochester. So companies like Stromberg Carlson, a number of other companies that eventually became part of either Harris or Stromberg Carlson. We have Harris equipment down here.
I had heard about Harris and, only been a ham for a couple of years. It wasn't really until I came here last year and I realized just how strong the DNA is in our region when it comes to radio and wireless. And
We have so many radio clubs around here, and
Yeah.
Lara, the one that we both belong to, has 500 members, and it's a very active club. So there's still a lot of ham radio activity in the area.
very, very cool.
Okay, there's one last important thing we should look at.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's good. I remember this as the African American contributors to communication technology. Very nice.
Of course, one of the things people wanted radio to do was to allow you to make telephone calls from your car or whatever. So here we see Motorola mobile telephone from 1948, and you've got the transmitter and the receiver, and you put them in the trunk of your car, as you can see in that photograph. This is the handset that would be in the car. Excellent. The only snag is that there were only, I think, 16 channels. So if this was in a city like Chicago or New York, you could have 16 simultaneous phone calls at once, or you just got the busy signal. So it had its drawbacks. It wasn't until the late 70s, the idea of cell phones, where you divide the country into small areas and switch the phone from one cell antenna to another. It was around, but no one tried it out until the 70s. This is 1978, and 100 of these first cell phones were built. This is serial number 1. So you're looking at the world's first cellular mobile telephone.
Wow.
And here you have what would be in the car, by the driver. HF was for hands-free.
Thanks for specifying that. Yeah.
Yes. So this was a cell phone prototype. Of course, it was not portable. But then we got things like this.
Oh, these are starting to look familiar now.
Yeah. But this radio here, this phone here, if you had one, it was probably your company who bought it for you. Because these were $4,000. And that's before you start.
And that's like 1980s money there too.
That was 1984. And then you get the revolution in cell phones, and they get smaller and smaller. Over here we have a satellite phone.
Oh, yeah.
These are still in operation. If you're in the middle of the Sahara, you want one of those because your cell phone won't get you very far. Okay, so we haven't seen everything, but we've seen a pretty good representative collection of the museum. Do you have any questions?
I don't. I mean, there's always so much to take in. Right now, for those of you, watching live, if you got a question, we're gonna get ready to wrap it up. But definitely, if you had a question, drop it in the chat. Well, and maybe wait and want to walk back to the Western Union Telegram room real quick.
Oh, yes.
Let's see that real quick before we wrap it up. Yeah. It really is a journey through time when you walk through here and you can see the evolution of communication technologies like over decades and decades and what amounts to centuries at this point. It's truly remarkable.
Chris, we do a quick 2 minutes.
Okay, wait a minute, just a sec, yeah, fine.
Okay, so this is a replica of
Disconnect.
a telegraph office.
Okay.
And there would have been these at many railroad stations, and this is where you would come. If you wanted to send a telegram, you would come here, you'd fill out one of these forms, and one of the operators would send the telegram for you.
Okay.
Here, I'm having a small internet problem. Give me a moment here. Get back together.
So as you'll probably hear in a moment, there are several stations here. And there will be an operator sitting in each one. And when a signal came in, it would come in on a single
I was actually
line.
talking to some real people, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me just reconnect to my broadcast wires here.
So you can switch the signal coming in to one of these desks.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'll let Chris explain in more detail. Go right on then.
Fine in.
I'll grab the
This
extra.
typically represents I'm sure what's going on here right now.
I'm gonna set the mic down right there. I'm gonna pick you up.
This represents a typical 1920s era telegraph office.
Okay.
Okay, that was the desk where people would come in to fill out their blanks, and I've got 3 operator positions. Those 2 are equipped with actual red front, why red I don't know, uppercase only typewriters. If you ever got a telegram, it was all uppercase. So why have to hold down the shift key? Okay.
Okay.
And if you hold on the shift key on any of those, you get a tilde. Why a tilde, I don't know that either. This desk is set up as a 4-wire desk. At least a moment ago, it was operating. I'm not sure why I'm losing, not getting a signal right now. Let me just try something here. That's because I can't type. Try that again. All right, we'll get BBC World News at 20 words a minute. There we go. That wire for some reason just died. Anyway, we're listening to BBC World News at 20 words a minute right now. And the desk is equipped as a 4-wire desk. There would normally be 4 separate wires coming to the desk. Right now, only one of them is operating. Okay? Each one would come to one of these mainline sounders and right in the main telegraph wire. Remember, a telegraph wire is a big series circuit. One person talks by opening and closing the wire, and everybody else listens and hears what's going on. But normal communication would just be between 2 stations. So you needed a way to identify the station. So every telegraph station was given an office call that was unique in that area, 1 or 2 letters. We call this one DW for Davis Wolf, a couple of other factors. Canandaigua over here was CA. Holcomb right here was EF. Train station still exists in Holcomb. It's now a car wash. Track's been gone for 60 years. Next station over, it's now a private house, is SA in Ionia. Now, if I'm sitting here and I hear my office call, I take this cordless plug and plug it into the cordless jack box for the selected wire. That switches it from its mainline sounder to this more sensitive mainline relay, which as you can see is operating the sounder and the resonator. Okay. Now, what's the whole purpose of this? This is a noisy place.
I bet.
People have typewriters, and I'm banging away at my own typewriter, so I can pull this arm out right up to my ear and hear it over the noise of the rest of the station.
Okay.
And of course, that also begs what's the tobacco can doing. Okay.
That's the amplifier?
We refer to it as the first telecommunications hack. Okay. We don't know who did it first, but it makes the sounder a little louder.
Okay.
And kind of gives it a note, so you can hear it over what else is going on in the station. All brands of tobacco were used. You can see you've got a velvet can there, but all the histories report Prince Albert. And that may be because there's that old joke about Prince Albert
In a can.
Why don't you let him out?
Yep. Fascinating. This is great.
You know, this again represents typical office. If you are a text message, you probably use a lot of shorthand. You think that's new. There's an example up there on the wall from a 1940 railroad magazine of a dispatcher and an operator chatting with each other using a bunch of shorthand. You can see the original, you know, and then what it actually means. There were formal shorthands. The Phillips Code, Walter Phillips, was used by press operators. Several thousand abbreviations for common words. T was the, TT is that. You sometimes still hear a Phillips Code, POTUS, President of the
United States. Yep. POTUS.
It was used by the railroads right up until the end. Believe it or not, this was still in use in this country on the railroads in the 1980s.
Huh.
Trains would be reported to a man in the central office called a dispatcher. He would have a very large sheet of paper, which you could recognize today as a spreadsheet. This is from 1974 from the Lehigh Valley, right here at the operator. Here's the main line. All the stations listed in columns or in rows, and each you got the westbound trains on opposite sides of the station names. Now this is of course a full days of operation, but you would, as a train passed a station, the station agent would report by telegraph the passing of the train. The dispatcher would then write in the time that it happened. Now they were started with a schedule, but we all know what happens to schedules. So with this information, the dispatcher could then send out to the stations what were called train orders, change meet and passes and anything else because the railroad fluid. I know there were still working wires. There was one between Cumberland, Maryland and Confluence, Pennsylvania into the mid-1980s. There was some out on the West Coast, I know, that were active up to about 1990. It was really that when all that coal line you used to see along the railroad fell, that finally the telegraph kind of came to an end.
Wow.
But we now, of course, as you can hear, have internet telegraphy.
Yeah.
A free program. If you have a PC, we have a free program you can download. It's called Morse KOB, MORSEKOB. You go to MORSEKOB.
Morse KOB, you said?
MorseKOB.org. You come to the page where you can download the PC program.
Awesome.
There's instructions about how to connect actual instruments. You don't actually need real instruments. It will make the sound in your computer speakers, and you can actually send by typing, but what fun is that?
Yeah.
And anyway.
Very cool.
Sure.
Thank you so much for the overview there. This is great. Here, Tim, I'll hand you the mic back real quick, and
Thank you.
I think we'll get ready to wrap up. Those of you watching, oh, hey, Ken, I saw you in the chat there. Say hi to you, Ken. I guess wrap up with the TV cameras, and that's a good way to close out.
WROC is one of our local TV stations, and we had someone here recently who'd worked there in the early days of TV, and he said, I remember using this very equipment.
I get so. Yeah, you really do cover all forms of
Absolutely.
wireless communication.
Yes. Everything.
Oh, take a quick peek inside. That's neat to see.
Load of vacuum tubes.
Yeah. So is that 1949? Wow.
Even these are heavy enough that cameramen
Yeah.
will have one shoulder lower than the other.
Yeah. I can't complain about my arm being sore for the hour of this live stream to just hold up a phone, let alone imagine something like that. Wow. Oh, this is great. Thank you so much, Tim.
You're very welcome.
I'm gonna wrap it up. This is the last call, guys. If anyone in the chat has a quick question, now's the time. So the museum is operated, the Antique Wireless Association. Anybody can join. I just signed up, and I think that the website is antiquewireless.org. That sound right, Tim?
Yes.
Antiquewireless.org. You can find out about the AWA there. You can find out about the museum and everything. And this is going to come to an end right now. Thank you, everyone. I know we had well over a dozen throughout most of the tour. Yeah, Ken, it's $35. I happen to have $36 cash on me, but they do take credit cards, so awesome. But thank you guys for tuning in, whether you're watching it live or anybody that watches this after the fact on Team Replay. Thank you very much, Tim, for
Thank you.
bringing us along on the
Pleasure.
tour. And everyone, enjoy the weekend. Hey, the VHF contest is going on now, so get out there and play some radio. Get off the TV. Thanks so much. And I'll say 7-3. I'm Mike, and 2MAK.
Bye-bye.